Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Brokers. Today, we have special guest Mike Bergen with Complete Crawlspace here with us. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure you're in very high demand. I'm sure a lot of podcasts want to have crawl space experts on. Have you been on Rogan yet?
This is actually my first podcast.
Okay.
Haven't done Rogan yet. We'll see about maybe next month after he sees me on your podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's in high demand for phone call. I feel like I call Mike 4 times a week.
Well, anyway, first of all, not all of our listenership is here in Charleston, so I think we need to start with what is a crawl space?
Well, a crawl space, in the Southeast, most homes built in the last couple hundred years would have a crawl space, and it's really a pier and beam foundation where you have an elevated floor system, and you actually have a space that you can crawl under the house. And, elsewhere, I guess slab homes have become more popular here. Florida, they have a lot of slab homes, and in the Northeast, we're looking at more basements. But here in the Southeast, we have a ton of crawl space homes.
Okay.
What's the benefit to having a crawl space?
Well, besides having a spot that you can store all the animals that come to visit you, like rats and raccoons and occasionally an alligator. It gives good access to all of the mechanical systems under the home. So you can, get to the HVAC, you can get to plumbing, you can get to electrical. So if you do have any issues, it's, you can fix it versus it being buried inside of a slab.
I never even thought about that because inside of a slab, if you have a plumbing issue, you're drilling into the concrete to fix it.
It's awful.
Okay.
You're fucked.
Okay.
What is the point of there are some crawl spaces that nobody can fit in, right? Like they're like 1 foot tall, and I'm like, bring your tiniest crawl space inspector because it's going to be really hard to get to. Why would a builder do that?
We deal with a lot of those on the peninsula here, and I think it was really just something that was easy during construction. Mm-hmm. We found one on Stoll's Alley years ago that was basically sitting on the ground. We had to tunnel underneath it. The homeowner was dead set on us getting under there, so we tunneled underneath there, and we found a couple hundred shoe soles and a couple thousand cow bones.
Whoa.
And the house had been propped up on shoe soles, and we did a little legwork, and we looked into the history of the house. And at one point, it was a butcher's house, and at another point, it was a cobbler's house. And so,
wow.
But it was resting really on the ground with, you'd have maybe one brick with a shoe sole on top of it, and then you had a sill. And what happens with these is, the shoe soles are actually a pretty good vapor barrier that keep the moisture from the soil coming up through the brick from getting into the wood. But lots of times what we see is that the soil moisture does wick up through the masonry piers, and it does over time decay the wood beams that are under there, and the house kind of settles down onto the ground around those masonry piers. We're actually, we've been joking about it for years, but I think I'm about to pull the trigger on a crawl space robot that can go into some of these shorter ones. Most of the time when we're dealing with those, and we get a lot of calls from investors from out of town that are looking to buy, and they're dead set on getting access to these spaces. And I was like, well, it's not typically feasible. And, we can tunnel into these spaces, but typically the seller is disinclined to allow that because it may be a 200-year-old structure, and no one's been under there since they built it. So, maybe 40 years ago the floors were up or something and they did a few things, but ultimately, no one knows what you're going to find in a situation like that. So we do have a lot of people that buy these homes not knowing, much about the foundation. And our advice to them typically is, walk through the house, walk around the house, if it's relatively straight, if it's relatively flat, and again, the key word there is relative, because, and again, this is on the peninsula, but what happens is, these homes, they're on soil that has shifted. There's a lot of infill here on the peninsula, and we get differential settling over time. And so looking at the house relative to the other houses on the street will give you an idea of, is this a solid structure? If it's more crooked than all the other houses, maybe you move on to something else, okay? If it's less crooked, great, okay? If it's the same amount of crookedness, well, okay, that's just what you got. So looking at that, it's really a relative thing, and it's like, what can I live with? Some people, they like it. It's, charming, I guess. Okay. But ultimately, yeah, those crawl spaces are less than ideal, but we see a lot of them here.
Yep. Okay, so I think we have a lot of questions about crawl spaces, but first, like, where'd you grow up? How'd you get into the crawl space business?
Yeah, why'd you pick that?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. Grew up there in the 80s. My father was a college professor there. He retired after, I think he was there 44 years. And lifelong Gamecock fan. Go Cox. Get the plug in there. We got to Crawlspaces, my business partner Paul and myself, through his kind of circuitous route. He's been a contractor since he was, I think, 21. And, he kind of moved into higher-end historic remodeling jobs in Columbia. And, I went to school at Virginia Tech for engineering, decided after 3 years that I didn't want to go do an internship in a sock factory, and decided I was going to be a carpenter. And, it's a long story, but I ended up working with Paul years later. And, we were in our mid-30s at the time. His wife is from Mount Pleasant. My wife actually had wanted to move to Charleston for years. And we were at a point in, business development where we were looking at the lack of scalability for the type of work that we were doing. It was very dependent on high-skilled labor, and as such, we were doing a lot of the work ourselves. So we did our market research, and we determined that, crawl spaces were actually an underserved, market that we could do very well in. And then we said, to heck with that. We're not going underneath houses, And we revisited about 9 months later, and I was about to get married. We were planning on having kids. And, the business side of it kind of won out. And we said, let's do it. And I think when we moved down here in 2016, we had, in like a 10-month span, we started a company, we moved, we had a kid, we got married, and it was a wild ride coming out of the gate down here. It's been good. At this point, we're in year 7, and we have 20 full-time employees.
Oh my gosh.
And we're in Columbia as well as here in Charleston. The Columbia branch, they move around. We work in Rock Hill. We work in Spartanburg, Greenville. And we're, expanding up toward Charlotte and toward Atlanta as well. The Charleston operation has been, the need is here in Charleston. We have gone up to McClellanville. We have gone down to Beaufort, but we try and stay local. There's just not really a big need for us to travel that far. Our crew here is, it's really a bunch of family guys. I think the core 8 guys that we have here in Charleston, I think we have, 17 kids. So everyone has at least 2 kids. And that's kind of who we hire. We don't hire for experience necessarily. We're actually looking for character. We're looking for a good fit with us. We want guys that are, responsible and, family oriented, frankly. And so we've grown, slowly, but somewhat organically here in Charleston. We're always on the hunt for new guys. And, when we find one that's a good fit and, works well with the crew, we do our best to retain them.
Okay. Am I special, or do you answer everyone's phone calls? So I don't think I've ever gotten your voicemail. And are you the first stop for all calls into the business?
No. So how we're set up, I have a cell phone and I do my best.
Thank God.
I do my best to answer that thing. I'm not shy about handing out my number. I do have people that call me at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning I've had. I can't tell you how many people have called me at 5 in the morning. Texts at 4:30 in the morning. I'll get back to them at 8:30, and they're not very happy that I took so long to get back to them. We have that. But Christy is our office manager. We have a company line. Lots of people call Christy as well. But
I have never once spoken to Christy.
Yeah. You really don't
Christy?
need to. Yeah, who is this Christy? She's the one that does all the things that Paul and I don't want to do. She's indispensable and really takes care of everything behind the scenes. But no, we want to be available. The main avenue that we find work is through developing relationships with agents, and we do a lot of work at time of sale, and so this stuff is very time sensitive, and so a quick turnaround, being available, getting the inspection done, and then a quick turnaround to get paperwork, as well as talking to everybody involved in the deal so that everyone's on the same page and knows what's going on. But yeah, no, I definitely try and be as available as possible. And frankly, sometimes it's kind of comical. I had a call, I think last year, 10:30 at night on a Saturday from a client that had an alarm going off on a battery backup system that we had. And I got out of bed. My wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I got my swimsuit. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we have a flooded crawl space, and I have to go get this thing to stop beeping." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Well, that's what we do." And so, yeah, at 10:30 at night, I was in a bathing suit underneath a client's home. Yeah, it was tons of fun.
Okay, does anything gross you out? I walk through a single spider web in the summer and my whole day is ruined.
It's funny. We have guys that love snakes. That if they see one, they will chase it down, and that's I'm one of those.
Oh my gosh,
we have guys that are literally terrified. They will start shaking
That's me.
when they see a snake.
Yeah.
I had a guy work for me one time that he screamed, he squealed. It was a shriek. He was terrified when a frog hopped out. And he jumped back, and then he jumped forward and tried to punch the frog.
Oh, God.
And I knocked his arm. I was like, "It's a frog, it's a frog." And so we get all kinds. We see everything under these houses. My business partner, he hates spiders. And he's, very frequently I get a text from him with a picture of a spider. Is this a black widow? Is this a brown recluse? And he's got all these things. I've just, I've learned that they don't really bother you. If there's a bunch of spider webs, if there's a stick handy, I'll get it and clear it out. But ultimately, if you just crawl through, they kind of go away. Same thing with rats. We see all those things underneath houses. It just...
Does your wife make you take your shower outside before you come inside every night? Because I sure would.
Well, thankfully these days I spend less time under homes, so that helps. But, she has been bugging me to buy a separate washer and dryer and put it in our barn to wash
your clothes.
my clothes in.
I don't blame her.
The barn is about 250 feet from the house. And I do have water and electricity out there, but I'm not trying to put that kind of hookup out there. So we compromised, and what we do, I'll wash my crawl suits, and I'll do an extra rinse, and then I'll put my clothes in afterwards. And then she's comfortable doing the kids' laundry and her laundry after that. But it is definitely a thing in our house.
Okay, so somebody starts with a CO 100 inspection or just a home inspection. Y'all don't do the inspections, right?
You will do. You do.
we can't, okay? So you need someone with the pest control, basically the bug license. You need a bug guy to do the CL100 report, okay? And once they generate that, we get the call, and it says, okay, we have this, this, and this flagged. And, you know, ultimately, depending on the time of year, we see, you know, lots of high moisture, we see not so high moisture. You know, this time of year, in the middle to late summer here, we see tons of high wood moisture readings on these CL100 reports. And there's sometimes, if it's borderline and we can find, you know, an obvious issue that we can correct easily, that's not going to cost a lot of money, that we know is going to provide, you know, a lot of benefit. Basically, it's going to move the needle. We're looking for low-hanging fruit, such as missing gutters, right? If we have a home that we have this time of year 22% wood moisture content underneath it, and we have poor grade around the house and no gutters, we know this water's coming off the roof and it's collecting around the foundation and it's elevating moisture levels under the home. If we can see something like that, then we can clear that CL100 relatively easily. Just recommend gutters. And we have to be, you know, reasonably confident that that course of action is going to work to clear that. And that's, you know, regardless of whether we're on the buying side or the selling side, okay? We're looking for, you know, accurate assessment and a viable path forward. And frankly, we're trying to do it as cheaply and easily as possible. Lots of times this time of year, though, we find that we'll have 28%, 35%, 40% or higher. And so these aren't really borderline situations, and we have to, you know, do heavier, more expensive work like drain systems and sump pumps or encapsulations with dehumidifiers. But yeah, no, we don't do the CL100s ourselves, but they quickly come across our desk, and then we address the issues that are flagged on them. And we clear, you know, anywhere from, I'd say, 1 to 4 a week is typically what we're doing with CL100s. So, you know, gotten to know the different inspectors and how they write them and what they're looking for over the years.
So other than high moisture, termite damage, fungus, and other like wood destroying beetles or...
Yeah, no, you've got them all there. You've got the wood decay, and that can be, you know, it can be rot from high moisture, or it can be damage from insects, and insects are beetles or termites typically. And then, you know, if you've got, I've seen, you know, standing water gets listed on a CL100, though I don't think it has a specific box to check for it. It's just kind of part of the high moisture under the home. But really, that is in place. You know, basically it's an inspection on the done on the lender's behalf, kind of to protect them and their investment. You know, because a lot of these things, if you have heavy structural damage, if you have, you know, termites, certainly, if you have high moisture, if you have rot, these things are issues that balloon and can, you know, seriously impact, you know, the wealth or the you know, the integrity of the home, and thus the you know, what it's worth. So that's really, I think, there just to protect the lenders. I mean, it's smart as a buyer to get it, you know, even if it's not in the contract. It gives you more leverage, I think.
And do you treat for termites, or just do you repair termite damage?
Yeah, so the treating for termites, that again is a separate license. It's a specific you know, pest control license that, you know, the termite companies carry. We do all the structural work repairing that damage. We don't kill termites. We know lots of people that do. If we come across active termites, you know, I'd call one of the guys and they come over and take care of them.
But it's not just real estate contracts where you can help. I mean, if somebody's been living in a house for the last 5 years and nobody's crawled under there, I mean, I always tell people, I'm like, have a contractor do a lap around your house once a year. You might want to have one of you guys crawl under there once every 5 years, because these problems need to be nipped in the bud when, if because you don't know what's going on under there. What if there is a leak? I mean, that can lead to, it becomes deferred maintenance, but nobody's crawling under their own house.
It's true, yeah. And, we do free inspections. Anyone that calls us that wants us to go into their house.
Call Mike on a cell.
Yeah, we're happy to go by and check it out. I think the best first line of defense there is having a termite bond on the house. Termites are kind of a way of life here. Definitely recommend having a bond from a reputable company. They're going to look at it at least once a year. They're scheduled, they come out once a year, and their interests align with the homeowner's interests. And so what they're looking at is exactly what, would, negatively impact that home in the long term if it's wet under there. The termite guy doesn't want to see that, okay? So he's going to tell the homeowner, and they're going to call us. But that's an annual inspection. We can come do those inspections, but most people, if they're smart in Charleston, have a termite bond on their house. And, the good ones that we like are, Palmetto is great. Trip Cumming at Barrier Pest Services, he's great.
He's funny too.
He's a trip, yeah. There's a few others that are good, but frankly, for the most part, we've been less than impressed with, it's kind of, there's 25, 35, more different termite companies in town. And so having one that, do your due diligence, vet them before you hire them, because you're entering into a contract and it's expensive for that initial treatment. Typically you're looking at, a minimum of maybe $1,200 or something, and some houses up to $4,000 for that initial treatment. And then, there's an annual carrying cost there that you're paying to keep that bond. So, you want to get a good company, up front. You don't want to switch because you may have to do a retreatment with a new company. So having one that's reliable and is going to do a good job with that annual inspection, that's really your best insurance on the front end. But yes, you can call me on my cell, and one of our guys, probably Brandon, will come by and tell you more about your crawl space than you ever wanted to know.
So one thing, termite damage. So my house, you've actually crawled under a couple of times, and there's past termite damage. What percentage of homes do you see, and it's probably greater on the peninsula, that have past termite damage? And then the other question I want you to answer is, like, as a real estate agent, if I have a client who's making an offer on a property downtown, I'm managing expectations. I'm like, this CL 100 is going to come back and it's going to be real bad. Okay. Because this house is 150 years old. He's not going to be able, it's going to say inaccessible areas. We're not going to get a clear picture. What are like 3 or 4 things that you wish every real estate agent would say to their client before they get to you to kind of manage expectations about a crawl space?
Wow, yeah, no, that's a great question. And, I preach managing expectations every day. And, I try and manage my clients, real estate agents' expectations, and then I frequently am coaching them on what they should share and what conversations they need to be sure to have with their clients so that they can provide the best service to them. Because the surprises there are really, as when a house goes under contract, everything can move pretty quick. And the closer it gets to close, it seems the quicker things move. The CL 100 is almost always, late in the process, and it's like, the sky is falling. Let's, what do we do? And so explaining the types of issues that the homes in that part of town frequently have, and really just reassuring a client that you have, a reliable, a reliable, resource in Complete Crawlspace that's going to handle it, that's going to be able to explain all these things to them and then handle it in a timely fashion. That would be first and foremost. If you've got a listing agent, they're about to put a house on the market, for agents that we've worked with or agents that are referrals. We don't really do it on cold calls, but we will do pre-listing inspections for agents that we work with or referred to us, and we do those free of charge. And so we're going under the house before it goes on the market, and we're pointing out things. We're going to look at everything, but we're looking specifically for things that could derail a sale. You know, if we have extensive water or mold, right? If we have heavy structural damage, these are things that you really want to address before the home goes on the market. Other things, you know, if it's a little dirty, if there's just, you know, a spliced floor joist or some dry stacked block, you know, maybe we're not worried about those things, okay? We don't want to, you know, try and make this place perfect before sale, because when a general home inspector goes in there, they will find something to take issue with. And when you're dealing with a home, especially on the peninsula, that may be 250 years old, there's going to be things under there that they can flag. So really it's about communication, and just, you know, being transparent, letting your clients know, and goes for me, it goes for agents as well, you know, what to expect in the process. Just like you said that you do, that's perfect. That's what you want to do. And, you know, I'm happy to field a call and talk to, you know, agents, clients before, you know, they have a house under contract. You know, if they want to say, what do you see in this part of town? You know, we're going under, you know, 550, 600 homes here in Charleston a year. And so we see the same sort of things in the different neighborhoods. You know, it's kind of neighborhood by neighborhood. It's, you know, we've just got so many different areas of town here. So we can speak, you know, very intelligently and accurately to what they will most likely see under most of these homes.
Just since you brought up the sky falling, you know, very approaching closing, agents, please stop making the CL 100 contingency due within like 10 days of closing. Just put that shit in due diligence, okay?
Yeah, that's what Erin and I do. So we do not make a contract contingent upon a CL 100 contingency, because that creates last minute issues, as Mike mentioned. And we have our CL 100s done during the due diligence period, because the buyer has the opportunity to ask for anything they want during due diligence. So I don't know why we don't write contracts like that, but that's what we tell our Smith Spencer agents to do.
Let's talk about mold, because I think it's a pretty common thing in crawl spaces around here, and it can send buyers like through the roof unnecessarily.
It certainly can. You know, mold is a fact of life here in Charleston, in South Carolina really, but especially here in the lowcountry. We see mold in, frankly, underneath every house that we go under. Most of the time it's lightweight surface mold. We do see heavier wood destroying fungus in a lot of homes. You know, people get scared of mold, right? They go, oh, is it black mold? And I'm like, well, you know, if it was technically black mold, you know, we wouldn't be talking, right? It's because I just crawled under there. It's like, you know, there are some heavily toxic molds. We don't see those, okay? The two that we deal with a lot that really cause the most issues, respiratory issues typically with people, are aspergillus and penicillium, and they grow at relatively low moisture levels, and it's a lightweight surface mold. It's easily aerosolized, so it gets in the air very easily, and people breathe it in. And so I try and explain to people, you know, the realities of mold in our environment, and it's, you know, we're not mold alarmists, okay? You have companies that are dedicated, that all they do is mold treatment, and they definitely come in with the, oh, you know, this is
they
really
like wear
unhealthy.
hazmat suits and shit.
Well, we wear hazmat suits.
Okay.
Yeah, you need that when you're doing the treatment.
Okay.
But I'm talking about the upfront assessment, okay? And I had a client recently that we were working on their house, and they had concerns about mold. And there was some mildew in the house. And he had a company come in and quote him $13,000. And I said, look, we see this stuff all the time. Let me come take a look. And I met him over there, and we went in the house, and we cut out some sheetrock, and I showed him where the mold was growing on the interior side of the sheetrock, but not within the wall cavity, and explained to him, dew point and how that occurs, and told him what over the counter stuff or what he could buy at Lowe's or Costco to take care of it himself, and you can get test kits online and send them off to a lab and get. If you're worried about it, after you take care of it, you can go swab the walls and surfaces in your home and send that test kit off if you want to be reassured. But a lot of companies, they kind of make a lot of money based on fear. So we're not mold alarmists, but we do a lot of work with people that have issues with mold. So most people are not going to have any health issues from the mold within their environment, but a lot of people, or some people, a high percentage of people that we deal with, because we are treating so much mold. We do a couple full mold treatments a week, and we have a dedicated crew that handles that. But people do have mold sensitivities, and we've seen very significant negative health impacts. It's typically respiratory, but it can be, mental function and even greater. It can be scary stuff. Most of the time, people know that they have those sensitivities. Okay, they're not finding out when they come to us, that this is going to be bad. They know about this, and if people are curious about it, I ask them, well, does anyone in your household have, recurring headaches, a cough that won't go away, scratchy throat all the time? These are signs that point toward maybe they need to go to a doctor and get some blood work done and see what's in their system and what they may be sensitive to. But by and large, the majority of people are not sensitive to the mold that we see in these structures, but it's in every crawl space that we go in.
And usually easily treatable.
It is. It is. Easy, I guess, is it is an involved process, but it is not necessarily difficult for us to fully remediate that space. And we do a two-part treatment where we're cleaning everything on the surface, and then we're going back with the EPA-registered antifungal to actually kill the mold. And after we've pre-wetted it with the cleaning agent, that antifungal is actually going to then soak into the wood, and it will kill mold that's growing in the wood, not just on the surface. But it's very important, and this is something we see a lot of companies fall down on. It's very important to get that space dried out in a timely fashion after that treatment. It really doesn't matter what kind of antifungal you treat that wood with. If you do not, aggressively dry it out afterwards, you will get regrowth. And that's kind of, we deal with regrowth a lot, and it's typically from other companies that have done treatment that did not immediately put a dehumidifier and fans in there. And that's, our protocol. We have the dehumidifier set, we have the fans ready, and so we do a treatment and we ventilate that space overnight because we want to get the odors out from the treatment, and then the next day we're going to seal up that space and turn on the dehumidifier and the fans. And we go from ventilation during treatment to circulation within the space and dehumidification. And the fans are important too because it allows it to dry out more evenly. If you just throw a dehumidifier into a wet crawl space without that circulation, you can get dry spots where the air coming out of the dehumidifier is blowing on one section of subfloor and floor framing, and you can get, cracks and all manner of issues and flooring and stuff. But ultimately, to back up and answer your question, it's not the end of the world if a house has mold under it. It's completely normal. here in Charleston.
You hear that, everybody?
Yeah, it is completely normal. The sky is not falling, and lots of times it's people from out of town. You know, most of the Charlestonians here are aware of it, but buyers that are coming in from out of town, they can get freaked out by it. But it is certainly normal, and it is certainly a manageable situation for sure.
One topic that I've heard very opposing opinions on quite regularly are vapor barriers and encapsulation. Some people are like, oh, it doesn't let the house breathe. And some people are like, oh, no, it's very necessary. Can you just like, I'm sure you could speak for an hour on it, but just kind of like, do you favor one way or another, or is it all dependent upon the crawl space?
It's dependent on the crawl space, but it's also dependent on the home itself. So a lot of the homes on the peninsula, you know, that are 100, 200 years old, they are, you know, the overall envelope of the home is loose. They're drafty, okay? They are not well insulated. They don't have, you know, sheet goods like plywood or OSB as wall or floor sheathing or roof sheathing. They have dimensional lumber. And, you know, it may have, you know, you've got wood siding, no insulation, and then, you know, a plaster wall. And, you know, everywhere you have an outlet or something, you know, when the wind blows, you can feel a draft coming through it. Those homes typically do better keeping them passively vented, so not encapsulating them. You know, and that's what we prefer to do if at all possible, okay? It just, when we close up that crawl space, we're creating a new environment for a home that has existed for hundreds of years and frankly, most times has been fine. And lots of times what happens is, you know, when these homes were built, we didn't have central heat and air, right? And so at some point they put AC systems in there, and there's lots of condensation coming off of that. Then because they have ductwork under the house, the rodents are in there, and the rodents want to get in the fiberglass insulation on the ductwork. So then they close up the underpinning, right? And you've got these Charleston singles that, you know, they originally were, you know, closed on the front, closed on the one side facing the neighbor, and then they're open on the courtyard side and open on the back. And so they actually get good airflow under them. But what happens is, you know, they get the rodents in there, they put in underpinning, and now the home can't breathe. And so, you know, it really, it's better to leave them as original as possible, typically. We do encapsulate some of them when it's necessary, when there's not really a better path forward. Vapor barriers, you know, versus encapsulation, again, it depends on the house. We even, you know, kind of common thinking, and something that, you know, we actually ascribed to early on in this line of work was that every house needed a vapor barrier. And, you know, people say, oh, you know, that gets flagged on inspection reports all the time. Oh, you need a vapor barrier. Well, what we've found is it's somewhat counterintuitive, but in some homes, even putting a vapor barrier under the house will have a net negative effect on moisture levels, okay? And where we see that happen, it's got to be a crawl space that is on grade or just slightly negative, meaning that the ground level under the home is level with the ground level outside the home. And what happens there is you're not going to get a lot of groundwater intrusion. You're not going to have a really wet ground under the house as a result of it being lower under the house, okay? And so we're looking for soil level moisture. If it's dry, if it's sandy in there, and especially if we have that in conjunction with ductwork, we're typically recommending no vapor barrier even. If it's got good airflow in there, great. You want the airflow, it'll dry off condensation on the ductwork. The condensation that does fall off the ductwork, it's going to fall on that dry, sandy soil and soak in. If we put a vapor barrier in those, that condensation, it pools, and it just kind of sits there, and it elevates humidity levels and wood moisture levels in that space. So it really is a house by house sort of thing. Some are better with a vapor barrier, some are better encapsulated, some are better with nothing. And sometimes you have options. Other times we're going to tell you, look, this is what you have to do. If there are options, we're going to explain all the options and the pros and cons of trying different things. If we're sure about what you need to do, we'll tell you. If we're not sure, we'll just try and give you as much information as possible so you can make the best decision.
Y'all, Mike is like this every time on the phone, like completely detailed and thorough. And sometimes he'll spend like 15 minutes explaining something to me, and I'll be like, okay, I need you to hang up and call my clients and just repeat that exactly, because I cannot remember everything you just said, and explain it in a way that
he's an
they're going to
engineer.
track.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And, for all of you that say you want to go into real estate, Mike is one of the hurdles. In Crawlspaces, that's one hurdle in a deal that we have to overcome. We're having conversations like this with other contractors and the termite guy, and it's
Endless.
Yeah. So anyway, and nothing is straightforward.
No, I'm very glad that I work in Crawlspaces and I don't have to do y'all's jobs.
Likewise.
I frequently am talking to agents and I'm like, wow, man.
Well, and I don't know if you remember but you crawled under my house. I had a buyer for my house last year, and she wanted you to crawl under it because my house, the floors are a little bit like a roller coaster, which was built in 1986, but that's how it was built. So the floors are in the same direction as the joists, the hardwood floors. So I have this kind of wave, which you said to them is not a problem. It's how it's built. It's set a little bit normal. Yeah. And they were like, we're ripping up the floors and setting them the other way. And they want to try to negotiate with me for like $100,000 on floors. People are fucking crazy, okay? All right, that's what Mike's trying to say. I wanted to paraphrase.
There you go.
Just since you brought it up at the beginning, have you seen a couple alligators in Crawlspaces?
One of our guys pulled an alligator out of the house. Yeah, he did.
Did you try to punch him first?
No, he didn't get in a fist fight with him. He was sad. I think the most interesting creature I pulled out was a crawdad, and he was feisty. But I got him in my inspection box and took him outside. And it was kind of funny because, I wanted him to go somewhere good, and I ended up, walking a couple hundred feet through a marsh out the back of the backyard, and got completely muddy to go put him in a nice, new home.
And he died in the box,
no,
right?
No.
Damn.
Probably something ate him immediately, but no, we, most of the time what we're seeing there is, innocuous stuff that won't bother you, but occasionally we do see the occasional, venomous snake, a copperhead typically, and those guys, you definitely leave them alone.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody how they can find you, and don't give out your cell phone number, because I like that you answer my phone calls. Give them Christy's number.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, man, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know our company phone number.
It's okay.
Google
Give
it.
the website.
CompleteCrawlspace.com. We're here in Charleston. Don't call the Columbia office. But you can give us a ring. Christy will, take all your information. She's fantastic. She'll pass that information along to me, and I'll call you up, ask you some more questions. We really want to have as much information as possible going into these. It speeds up the process, but it also makes us aware of potentially what that client has been told and by whom, and what their main concerns are, and where those concerns are coming from. This is all important information for us to be able to provide the best possible service, because we don't want to just tell people, hey, you need to do this. We want to find out why they're concerned, who told them what, and then explain to them how that is or isn't an issue. But yeah, give Christy a call, completecrawlspace.com. We'll get you there. And we'll be happy to come out and crawl into your house.
And I want to add that Mike is like the most non-alarmist, fair guy in the crawl space business that I've come across. There's a lot of companies out there, I think, because they know that the agent, the homeowner, the buyer, like no one's going to crawl under the crawl space and check it out for themselves. So they will sell you on the works. Oh yeah, you got to replace this beam. You got to, like $10,000. And then Mike comes out and he's like, no, that's not the situation. Here's what it is. And it's going to be $2,500, but whatever it is. But he's completely fair, not an alarmist. And that's why he's my crawl space guy of choice.
Use Complete Crawlspace. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Tell all your friends about Between Two Brokers. We appreciate you listening. Bye.